It is wonderful to be here with you today. Thank you so much for your time. And we're really going to talk about legacy planning. And I named in worship that the Presbyterian Foundation's been around since 1799. It's amazing. We're in our 226th year now. We are one of the 5 agencies. The other agencies are the Unified Agency. It used to be, we said 6 agencies. The Office of General Assembly and the Presbyterian Mission Agency have just merged. So it is so new they don't even have a good name. So they're the Unified Interim Agency. The Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program, Presbyterian Publishing, Board of Pensions, and then the Foundation. And for those, we're grateful for those churches who pay their per capita that supports the Unified Agency, but the other 4 agencies were self-funded. So just based on the assets that we manage, our basic fees on that and all those basic fees go back into serving the church. And so I come to you here today at no cost for the congregation. We exist to support you so your ministry will flourish. From Psalm 24, "The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it." This is a fundamental truth for our lives, that we are children of God and all we have comes from God. So as we think about the why today, we acknowledge that stewardship is a fundamental act of not just worship as we gather as the people of God, but of our daily lives, how we engage in and out and care for all that God has given us. When we think of estate planning, it's really the process of making a faith-based decision about that final act of stewardship. And we know it can be fraught with emotion, with fear, with anxiety, but it could, and it really should be, a time of reflection and joyful purpose. Now, we know, because of Giving USA, they've been studying American philanthropy for the last 60 years or so, that Americans give more to religious institutions, and I'm not talking seminaries or hospitals or other missions affiliated to, but houses of worship. So churches, mosques, synagogues, Americans give more to houses of worship than any other charity. 27% of all charitable dollars. Now, we don't know about 2024 yet. That report will come out in July of this year. But it was 27%, the largest piece of the pie. This is annual giving. And the next largest sector was education at 14%. Now, if we give the biggest piece of our pie to the church in our living, what do we do in our dying? So only 5% of Americans leave a bequest. But of those surveyed, 24% say if they were only asked, they would do so. But of those bequests that are received, if we give 24% to the church in our living, what do we give in our dying? Popcorn. Throw some numbers at me. What do you think? 5%. Okay. Others? 1. 2, 3. Any others? 8%. So a little better than you thought. But it begs the question, if we're resurrection people, we can't take our stuff with us, and U-Hauls don't follow hearses. What's going on? The church just is not talking about it. So I'm so grateful for the opportunity to preach today, but also present to help you think through why would you claim a legacy and why would you plant seeds for future generations to hear the gospel. So estate planning offers Presbyterians really the opportunity to make an enduring statement of faith. And a gift of a small asset can be turned into a gift which will support your choices in perpetuity, really sharing your values. When we think of estate planning, we think, what is it, right? It's really about the process of making decisions about the future distribution of your material assets. It is a statement of both faith and finance, reflecting your desire to allocate a portion of your earthly assets to the church. Not on this slide. It's also about how you share what's valuable, your values. It's not just things and monetary assets, but it's also how you share your values. And so as you think about estate planning from the asset side, I also want you to think about it in terms of how you can share your values with your family, your friends, with your church, maybe through a brief letter, or even something simple like just a paragraph to your church. This is why this community of faith has made such a difference, and I want to have a legacy. Being able to share that story makes a difference. There is a journalist by the name of Susan Turnbull. She used to be Presbyterian. She was a member of First Charleston in West Virginia. But when she moved to New England, there aren't as many Presbyterians up there, so she's not Presbyterian anymore. But a good friend, right? She was a journalist and established a company called Personal Legacy Advisors, and it has nothing to do with money. It's about helping people craft an ethical will, really, where they share the story of what's important to them through a letter or a brief document with their family, their loved ones, and their church. So, as you're thinking about a good plan, I want you to think about how can you tell the story to folks? Is it something you can write down? Is it something you can even record on your smartphone? Or maybe you even have a dumb phone, but they're still recording on it. If you're not a big writer, record something there, but then text it to your loved ones or friends so they have it, and then after your lifetime, they can reflect on it, right? Really as a gift. A good plan should include decisions regarding guardianship if you have dependent children. We don't have as many younger folks here today, but this is an important conversation for you to carry to them. Those who are parents of young children, but even those who have kids that are just turning 18, right? I worked with a church in New Jersey, and an elder said to me, Ellie, my son died in Blacksburg, Virginia. It wasn't one of the Virginia Techs. It wasn't the mass shooting, but he died suddenly at 26. He didn't have a will. It made a traumatic event even worse. So much so that my ex-husband and I paid for our 2 living daughters to get a will, so that heaven forbid a tragic event happen again, it doesn't have to be as severe for us. Right? So thinking about people of all ages, having a power of attorney for your finances, should you become incapacitated, or maybe you don't even become incapacitated. Maybe you're traveling to Europe for the summer, or you're going to Africa for a safari, and someone invades your bank account or messes up your credit history. Having someone back home who is a durable power of attorney who can help get things slowed down or stopped until you can get home is really important. Having a healthcare proxy with the responsibility of who's going to make your medical decisions on your behalf if needed. So key things you want to consider is having a will. 50% of Americans don't have one. How many in here are you comfortable saying? You don't have to, but how many in here have a will? Okay, so the greater number, but a lot of people don't, right? And so if you don't have a will, the state of Pennsylvania determines, based on a schedule, what happens, right? So having a will enables you to claim what it is you want. Healthcare proxy, so who can make decisions on your behalf, right? In my sermon, I told you I did not want my dad making my decisions. He was a nervous Nelly. I could have my 2 sisters. I could have my mom who was living in Florida, but it could not be my dad, right? Tax reduction plans, that's always a nice thing, right? Guardianship for dependents, ownership of your assets, a living will directive, and trusts. Ways you can give through your will or bequests, gift of non-traditional assets, life insurance, your retirement assets, your restricted gifts, your unrestricted gifts. Now, some people will put a will together and they think, oh, it covers everything. We had a lady who was a school teacher in Pittsburgh, never married, no kids, and she told the pastor, I'm leaving $1 million to Unity. She died. She named the church in her will for everything. She did not understand that the beneficiary forms on her retirement and investment accounts, she listed her brother. So legally, rightly so, her brother got everything. The church got nothing as she intended. She just didn't think about that. So if you have, retirement savings, investment accounts, anything that's governed by a beneficiary form, it counts toward your overall value of your estate in terms of taxes, but it is considered separate from your will, unless of course you name your will as your estate as the beneficiary, but most people list individuals. So you want to think about that, right? There are different ways you can give. You can have a giving plan, you can give real estate, you can set up an endowment fund. That's what we're known for at the foundation. We have over 900 endowment funds. Our oldest ones were created in 1821. The first president of our foundation was Elias Boudinot. Who here likes American history? Anyone? Okay. Elias Boudinot was a member of the Continental Congress, president of it for a time. He was a representative from New Jersey, but he was a Presbyterian elder from First Presbyterian in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And he was our president of the trustees from 1799 until he died in 1821. And at that time, he left 2 of his homes to the Presbyterian Church in the USA, that they might be sold and put into these permanent endowment funds that would generate income every year and be distributed so that they're invested in such a way that they grow with inflation, so that you have the same purchasing power you had back in the day, but supporting that ministry in perpetuity. And so one of those funds provides ministry to seafaring people in New York City and Philadelphia. Very particular. It's actually seamen, but I feel more comfortable saying seafaring people, which is really fitting for today more so. And the other provides theological text to feeble congregations across our denomination. So the Office of Financial Aid for Studies distributes books every year to first call pastors serving in small churches. So that's how they live it out. Other things you might think about are donor advised funds, securities, trusts. So when you're thinking about planning, so I don't think we have any 20-year-olds in here right now, right? Whether you're 18, 19, 20, you're in your mid-20s, maybe you're in your first job and it's the last part of your 20s, folks can designate the church as a partial beneficiary of your retirement account. And you can begin a faith practice of regular giving to your church. But once you're 18, you can start thinking about having these things in place. But once you're in your first job, this might be the opportunity. For those in their 30s, you have perhaps advanced in your career, and you may have reached a point of personal and professional life where having a will and life insurance is wise. Selecting your executor is crucial, and designating your church as a beneficiary of your will or your life insurance is another opportunity you might want to claim. When you're in your 40s, you're balancing being present over both your present needs and your future plans. It's time when you're going to review your will again, your life insurance, your retirement accounts. You're going to confirm that your executor is still available and willing to serve in this way. When you get into your 50s, it's really a great time to review and update your will and, again, confirm that executor. Consult with your financial advisor regarding trusts, donor advised funds, and other instruments as a means to preserve your faith-giving priorities. When you're in your 60s, another time to consider end-of-life decisions. It's saying create a living will. My colleagues put this in here. You need to do that living will when you're 18 years old too, right? What if something drastic happens? You can write your funeral plans. You can write these at any time, right? It's really useful though. You might be thinking about it more in your 60s, but you can do it at any time. And there's, in your folders, there's a Composing a Legacy brochure, and that's a really handy guide. The next piece is your estate planning workbook. That is a great inventory to have to take to your lawyer when you're going to put your will together, but it's also a great instrument to have all your information in for your executor. I tell folks, Eric and I was 37 when I married. We had completely individual lives, right? My husband is very smart. He does free radical and radiation biology, right? I don't understand half of it. But as smart as he is, he doesn't understand his own TIA CREF, and he knows nothing about my Board of Pensions, right? And then we have a number of checking accounts. His, mine, ours together. It's weird, but it's just what works for us, right? But if I were to have a car accident on the way home, I've only filled out half of that estate planning worksheet. I really need to complete it in total because it would make things a whole lot easier for Eric. What I love about that worksheet, there's blank space in the back. You can write down your favorite passages, write down your favorite hymns. We had a church in Pittsburgh Presbytery where the organist died, and her family did not think it was important to have a funeral service for her, right? Had she had that documented, it might have been a little easier. That church was forlorn because the family was very intentional not to have a service. And so they had to figure out another way to have an expression of celebrating her life. My dad died 2.5 years ago, and he died suddenly with COVID. He woke up dead on New Year's Eve day, 1:30 in the morning. His CPAP machine went off. He was still holding my stepmother's hand. I have no idea how someone goes to sleep holding someone's hand and stays that way all the night through, right? But he died hand in hand with my stepmom, and he had COVID. It was asymptomatic. She was very sick, had vascular dementia. Like, the TV was talking to her because the COVID made her so sick. And his was a light one, right? But he died in his sleep. And because he died on New Year's Eve day, like, we couldn't have the funeral for another week because you couldn't get it in the paper. Turns out, today it's a little different on getting obituaries in the paper than it was 10 and 20 years ago. You could have it in the following day, and you could have the funeral 3 days later, right? So his funeral wasn't until Saturday. Now, my dad had asked me 4 years before, Ellie, will you do my funeral? And I said, I thought you were having Chuck Camerata do it, a friend of his in the presbytery. And he said, Ellie, no one does a funeral like me, and I taught you how to do a funeral, so I want you to do my funeral. Okay, Dad, right? That's my dad, yeah. And so we talked about favorite passages, and I knew a lot of them, and I had scribbled some things down. I knew that one of the hymns he loved is In the Bulb There Is a Flower. And another hymn was Come Thou Font of Every Blessing, and then All the Saints. Those were like the hymns. But my stepmother did not believe me, and it wasn't written down. And all week, he dies early hours Saturday morning, his funeral's the following Saturday. All week, my poor sister Jenny, who doesn't find herself to be much of a singer, is having to keep visiting the house singing hymns out of the hymnal to figure out what was the hymn Harry wanted. And Jenny sings, Come Thou Raise My Ebenezer. My stepmother says, that's it. And Jenny calls me and I'm like, I said that one earlier in the week, right? Write it down, because whether you're suffering from dementia from COVID, she's oddly, her brain came back to her after she got over COVID. Thanks be to God, right? But just the from being ill and then the trauma of his sudden death, like nothing was familiar. So write those things down just so it's easier for your family members, right? So use that as you put together your funeral plans. And you can put them on file in the church office. I had a member at Warren do that. And actually, I arrived there, started June 1st, and this woman died the third week of June. And she was 94 or 95. Every few years, she'd go into the office and update her order of service, right? But the neat thing is we were able to, her name was Jane Munn, and we were able to give a witness to her resurrection that really fit who she was as a child of God. So think about writing this up, make it easier for your family, take those burdens away from them, reducing that planning at the time of your death. You're going to want to review your will and other elements of your estate plan. In your 70s, continue to talk with your family about your end-of-life decisions. You know, sometimes people will put together that living will of what kind of care they need at the end of their life. If you have a good lawyer, it will make sense. Sometimes it doesn't. Talk with those folks who will be your healthcare proxy so they can know and understand what it is you really want, so that when you need it, they can be faithful and living into your plans. If your financial portfolio has changed, make appropriate changes to your will or estate plan. When you're in your 80s, your 90s, if you're 100 years old, live your life. Look, I found an error in this, and love your family. Your estate plan has been prayerfully considered and defines the faith legacy you will leave. We want to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Now, if you're in your 80s, 90s, or 100s, you haven't done it yet, it's okay. Work on it now. Don't be afraid of doing this. You know, there is only one thing more certain in life than taxes. As soon as we're born, the reality is we will all die one day. So how do we just claim what it is we want? So as you think about wills and bequests, your will is really the foundational document of your estate plan and the starting point for making important family and faith decisions. It gives you the power to make decisions about the distribution of your assets rather than just leaving those decisions to the probate court, as I said earlier. And you want to keep your will up to date and review it periodically. So Eric and I last did our will 11 years ago. I know that we need to go in and update it because, like, his Aunt Martha died 7 years ago. She's not a lot around, so we need to update those things. Things you want to consider in reviewing your will. Certain life changes may be a good time to take that into consideration. Maybe you've just birthed or adopted a child. Your children have grown or married. You've lost a spouse or a loved one. You've divorced or married. You've moved to another state. That's a big one. You need to create a new will in the state in which you are residing. Or you have a change in your financial situations or holdings. Now, I have lots of tales of this is you don't want to happen, right? My stepsister was married and her husband died of pancreatic cancer. And a few years later, she met another fellow who became her partner. They never formally married, but she and Bob lived together and shared a whole life together. And Bob had a heart attack while driving to work 2 years from retirement, found in Erie, Pennsylvania, dead. Now, he and Jackie had remodeled the kitchen, done all these things in his home, and his home was her home. And in his will, after he divorced 12 years earlier, he updated his will and he just left everything to his dad. And his dad was 98, 99. But what he didn't realize is when he got divorced, his divorce decree did not govern those beneficiary forms, and he had not updated them. His ex-wife got all of his retirement and his life insurance, right? You want to make sure you're looking at these forms when you're updating them. Bob's dad was such a generous man, and he didn't need a house. And there was a mortgage on it from doing that kitchen, right? And so he gifted it to Jackie, and she just had to renegotiate the mortgage. So she had a home, right? 4 months after my dad died, nearly 5, after 9 weeks in the hospital, Jackie died. The neat thing is she had this home that she was able to leave to her siblings. And so Sharon, Jeffrey, and Brian all got a share of her home and were able to have some legacy. And that was pretty nifty too, right? But you just want to make sure you're updating those things. While Jackie was in the hospital, she didn't have a will. And my sister Jenny is like the family person who connects everyone in. And she had already set up my stepmother for updating her will after my dad dies. It was actually, they had a meeting in place because they were wanting to update it with Diana being so sick with COVID. They were updating it for Diana instead of my dad, right? But she had this lawyer she was already working with. And so when Jackie was in the hospital, when she finally decided to go on palliative care, the last 10 days of her life, that lawyer came into the office, to the hospital, and crafted her will for her, and they were able to sign it because, see, Jackie was widowed, her partner in life was gone, she didn't have a will. Her mother would have been named by the state of Pennsylvania as executor. My sisters Jenny and Shayna were doing her bills. She didn't have the capacity for that, right? But fortunately, while she was going through this process in the hospital, Jenny was keeping her eye on the situation and figuring out when is the appropriate time to say, let's get this in order, Jackie, so that your mom doesn't carry that burden and you can claim Sharon to be the executor you want her to be. And so they were able to do that. So I always have these stories of cautionary tales, but I think they're useful, right? So when you're writing your will, you want to think about if you're making a bequest, how are you making it? Is it a direct gift to your church? Eric makes a direct gift out of our will to First Christian Church in Cedar Falls, Iowa. It has a restriction to it. It's for the Silver Linings Fund, so to be used for children in need in the Waterloo and Cedar Falls communities, right? Where mine is to go into a permanent endowment fund, so it will generate income in perpetuity for First Presbyterian Church of Warren, but there's no restriction on mine. The session can use the income as they see fit. So once you've figured out, do we want it to be a direct gift? Do we want it to be a gift to the foundation to create an endowment? How do you want the gift to be made? You can contact your attorney to help formalize your will, but you can also call me to help me to have me just ask you questions to think through some of those things ahead of time so you can save money. Is that fair? And you want to consider your beneficiary, but also your executor who can help you carry out your wishes. The things you want to consider when drafting your will: use that inventory of assets, identify your beneficiaries, the people and your organizations, and you want to explore different giving options. Now, you might have some non-traditional assets you want to consider. They just don't have to be money, and there are ways you can give that. One, you might consider life insurance. Now, you can include State College Presbyterian Church as a beneficiary of your life insurance plan. Now, remember this: life insurance is a non-taxable event. If you have human beings you want to leave anything to, leave them your life insurance first because they don't pay taxes on it. We're a nonprofit, it doesn't make a difference to us. If you want to give the money to State College Presbyterian Church, they're glad to take it. But if you have human beings you're considering, give them out of your life insurance first. But you can have a policy, you can establish a policy where you make the church as a beneficiary, the sole beneficiary or contingent beneficiary. You can also transfer the ownership of a plan to your church or to the Presbyterian Foundation for the benefit of your church or its mission of choice. You also want to think about your retirement assets. This is the largest tax portion of your estate ordinarily, that which went in pre-tax particularly. And you can include the church or the Presbyterian Foundation or a favorite charity as a beneficiary of your retirement account. When setting up your retirement account, the options are to list your church or missions close to your heart. You might also say, golly, I have this retirement account. I know there are certain laws for how my family will have to spend it and take the QCDs, but maybe it's really large, and you want to reduce their tax burden. You can roll that into a trust, where you would name a trust, and you can use the Presbyterian Foundation for that. The trust is established if you do a charitable trust, where it will distribute income for that person's life for a term of, say, 20 years. And then after that lives that are named conclude, whatever's left goes to your church. So at the Warren Church, we got word that a fellow died and we were getting $70,000 in 2012. And no one knew his name. So we did some research. Turned out his mom and dad were active in our church in the 1960s. The dad was buried from the sanctuary in 64 and the mom from the chapel in 65. Now, why our session rolls told us what part of the building they were buried from, I don't know. But we were able to go back or talk to folks who are now in their 70s and 80s, who are young adults in the 60s, who knew this couple and could tell us a little bit about them and why they loved the church. But here, they had a charitable trust that supported their son his rest of his life, and then when he died, that remainder came to us. You can give a restricted bequest where you name specific causes which you support, but you want to keep that description broad so it doesn't become obsolete. Now, the best gift to your church is an unrestricted gift. Seriously, friends. That is the most useful. But if you are going to restrict it, we had a church in New York State who had $1 million endowment for their organ. There is a hole in the roof directly over the organ. They didn't have the money to repair the roof. And that restriction was written so tightly that they couldn't repair the roof with the income off of that endowment, right? You never want to be in that place. You know, if you want to give to, for church landscaping, it's better it's broad on landscaping rather than to a particular rose bed. We have a church who was to hang a wreath in a particular window, right? They did some construction. That window wasn't there anymore. They had to go to the state attorney general to get that restriction opened up a little bit, but it still had to be the next closest purpose or use, right? So you want to be mindful of what you're doing. But maybe there is a special program at your local church, maybe a program of the Presbyterian Church USA, Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, Presbyterian Women, 1 Great Hour of Sharing, or a Presbyterian-related organization or other charitable organization that's meaningful for you. So you can restrict, but talk to me and I'll help you think about how do you do it broadly enough so in 50 years or 100 years, if it is a perpetual gift, they can still use it. An unrestricted gift, as I said, really permits your church or institution to use your gift, the gift where the church needs it most. Other non-traditional gifts, we had a church get a teddy bear collection. Guess how much it was worth?
$10,000.
It was $15,000. Right? That's a lot of teddy bears for mission and ministry. Now, we have another church where my colleague Olanda is a member. They had received a doll collection, but there was a restriction put on that doll collection that they weren't ever allowed to sell it. So they have a creepy doll room at their church. Now, that session should have said, thank you very much for your thoughtfulness. We are going to decline that gift, right? Check and see if your church has gift policy so you can structure your gift with something the church will want to receive. Your direct gifts you can make at any time. Charitable giving plans, these are certain estate planning decisions that require assistance of attorneys or certified financial planners. We can walk alongside you with our professionals to help you think about that, but there are a lot of different ways you can support your church. With gifts of real estate, You can really have a unique gift opportunity regardless of the current value. Say you have a property that was purchased at low basis points, right? If you give it to your kids and then they go to sell it, say you bought it at $30,000, it's worth $300,000, they're going to have to pay capital gains on that. Maybe you have it go into a charitable trust that your kids will get income off of it for as long as they live. And there are other trusts you can put it in too. Talk to your lawyer. But if you put it into a trust, it will change the basis point to current, so they don't lose half of it in receiving it, right? So different things you can think about. But we have had folks who, whether it's a primary home, a secondary home, you can have a living trust where you put it in. We had some folks from New Jersey who had a condo, and they reached to us at the foundation and said, we want to give this to our church. We want that charitable gift now, charitable deduction. So we were able to vet them, evaluate, how are they going to continue to maintain this? Do they have the resources to continue the insurance and taxes, etc.? But we were able to receive that gift. They have the right to use it till the end of their life. And then when they die, we'll sell it, and the resources from that sale go back to the church at Dutch Neck that they love so much, right? Endowment funds. I talked about this a little bit about the foundation. Our minimum is $25,000. Like if I die today, I'm probably not going to hit the minimum. So the foundation will directly distribute that income to First Presbyterian Church of Warren. But if I live a little longer and have some better savings and our house paid down, right, I certainly will have that $25,000 gift that will really be that perpetual extension of what's important to me. Another thing you might consider are donor advised funds. So how many of you are familiar with donor advised funds? It's like having a charitable checkbook. Some have them through Fidelity, other folks. We offer donor advised funds at the foundation. Having your own family foundation can be quite pricey, and there's a lot of work to it, but a donor advised fund, you can open one for as little as $2,500. And on the last sheet in your folder on the right-hand side, it says more to share. The standard deduction went up in 2017, so a lot of folks quit itemizing. But say you give out $10,000 a year. Maybe it's $5,000. But if you're able to put this year and next year's gift, and you have the money sitting there, you could do it. You could put it in a donor advised fund, so you can itemize this year, and then next year take the standard deduction and you save money, right? Pretty nifty. So check that out if you're interested. I like the donor advised fund because it's a way of modeling generosity to my family. I have one. It's a great tool because I always have money squirreled away. If someone dies in lieu of flowers, I can quickly do a grant out to the church or charity in their memory. But one story I have for you. My daughter Ibby is 10 now. And when she was 5, we live on a farm, she was racing me out to the garden, and I was on the little riding tractor with my nearly 1-year-old. And Ibby made it a real competition, right? And she was running out to our garden, and she beat me there. So she started twirling around with her arms flying, so excited that she won. And her hand hit the muffler of the Cub Cadet, and she burned it severely. Luckily, we have good friends who are pediatricians who got us a script for that silver nitrate or whatever you put it on, and she was bandaged up for a few weeks. It's her right hand, her writing hand. As a preschooler, that was a bit tough. But the following week, we were up in Erie, and my sister's buddies, her children are older, but all the moms have remained friends, and they call themselves the tribe. And one of the tribe had invited everyone over to use their pool. And since I was in town with my girls, Jenny invited us to come too. And so Ibby had her bandaged hand with a plastic bag over it. And we get there and we see 2 of my nephew Joe's friends with bandages all over their body. they have what's called butterfly disease. It's a genetic disorder. All their fingers are now nubs. If you touch their skin, it will break open. They are so fragile. Their bandages must be changed numerous times a day. When they go to see their doctors out of town, the family actually has an RV because it's unsafe for them to stay in a hotel because of infection. But here these girls are in their swimsuits at the pool with bandages all about them. And Ibby says, "Mama, they're like me." I said, "Oh, honey, they don't have burns. It's something else." But on the way home, we talked about it, and my eldest is very curious and loves like scientific answers. So on the way home, I pulled up the Deborah website where she could learn a little bit about it. Now, some people are like, "Why would you do that to a 5-year-old?" Ibby is inquisitive. She was asking questions. But as she watched these videos and learned that the life expectancy is about 25, Lucy's oldest sister is 26. She's lived just beyond that life expectancy now. But I could see Ibby in the back seat going down 79 with tears down her face. And I said, "Honey, should we turn it off?" And she said, "I want to learn more." What can we do, Mama? There's not a whole lot we can do for the Pole girls. But we could make a gift to Deborah, and we do it every year in honor of those two gals. And Ibby knows that we're doing this, that we're trying to help be part of the research that will make a difference. You can have a donor advised fund, and you might be the only advisor, or maybe it's you and your spouse, or you and some friends. Or you can name your kids advisors or successor advisors. Or you can say to your grandchildren, "What's going on? What are you active with? Tell me this charity you're working with." Oh, let's make a grant out of the DAF. It's a great tool, so I commend that to you. You can also give gifts of appreciated security, stock, directly to the church. But we had a woman who came to us with Clorox stock that was worth $16 a share, and she bought it at like $8 a share. She had $200,000 in bleach stock, right? For her to cash it in, she was going to pay a lot in capital gains, and it doubled in value. But she put it into a charitable remainder trust. She was close to 90, so she had a payout of like 9% a year, better than any CD she could have gotten. But she got a charitable gift immediately, or charitable deduction. It was counted as a charitable gift. She was getting annual income of 9%, and then after her lifetime, her daughter was named as a successor beneficiary for a period up to 20 years. And then the remainder was going to her church and some other charity she loved. So there are different ways you can support the church you love. If you're over 70 and a half, don't forget about the ability to make a qualified charitable distribution off your IRA. You know, whether you're giving the church $1,000 a year, $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year. If you have an IRA, it's better than the gift deduction. Give it off your IRA because it counts toward your minimum distribution, and it doesn't count to your adjusted gross income, so it might keep you in a lower tax bracket. It also means what you have to pay toward Medicare might be lower too, so it can be advantageous for you to give off a QCD. I talked a little bit about trust. There's information here. And then just something to consider. In 2017, under the Trump administration, the exempt tax gift, the estate and gift tax exemption amount increased dramatically from like 5.7 up to 11.7 million. If you have more than $11.7 million, or if you're married and have more than $23.4 million, that's not me, but you never know. We could have the millionaire next door driving an old Pontiac yet, right? The highest estate gift and generation skipping tax rate is 40%. So you might be someone, or someone you know might have wealth of that nature. You can create a charitable lead trust where you would put that money in a trust now. You get the charitable gift, you get the gift acknowledgement You reduce the value of your estate. It pays out for a term to your church and other charities for up to 20 years. But once that time is over, it returns back to your estate. So either to you or to your heirs, greatly reducing the value of your estate. So there are some different options for folks. Know that as your MRO, I'm glad to be of resource to you. And you might call me and say, Ellie, we're going to the lawyer and we're going to make a direct gift. You know, we have tools at the foundation. You may never use any of our tools. That's fine. They're there if they're useful for you. But if they're not, you could still say, hey, Ellie, can you and the professionals at the foundation help me think through some of these questions before we go to our lawyer? We'll save some money on the hourly rate. But we can even give you boilerplate language to take to make it a little easier too. So all you have to do is call me. I'll come out, take you out for coffee, for lunch, whatever. But I'm here to walk alongside you to help you claim what your legacy will be for the gospel and supporting this church.